Forget the capes and castles. The vampires we're talking about today don't sparkle, and they're a universe away from the count we all know. If you think Dracula is the peak of vampire horror, I'm about to change your mind. Today, we're re-sinking our teeth into 7 modern vampire comics that are way more terrifying than the classic tale. Now, don't get me wrong. We have nothing but respect for Bram Stoker's masterpiece. Dracula is the foundation, the blueprint for all modern vampire fiction. He's the Gothic icon, the Lord of the Night, who defined the entire genre. But horror evolves. It adapts. And in the world of comics, a new wave of creators has taken that classic blueprint and twisted it into something new, something more brutal, and honestly, something much scarier for today's audience. These aren't your great-grandfather's vampires. They aren't charming aristocrats in remote castles. These are monsters forged in the grit of the modern world or reimagined in hyper-violent, stylized new mythologies. They're savage, they're political, they're psychologically terrifying, and they represent the absolute cutting edge of vampire horror. So if you love horror comics, and you always on the hunt for genuinely terrifying reads that push the boundaries, you are in the right place. And you should probably subscribe to the channel right now, because we have a lot more darkness to explore together. Today, we're counting down 7 vampire comics that are scarier, more brutal, and more innovative than Dracula. We'll get into what makes each one a masterpiece, exploring their unique mythologies, their stunning artwork, and the visceral fears they tap into. This is vampire horror redefined. Section 1, Number 7, Vampire Verses. Kicking off our list at number 7 is a raw, visceral, and unapologetically indie creation that feels like it was ripped straight from the 90s underground. The Vampire Verses, created, written, and drawn by the super talented Frank Forte. This series wears its heart on its sleeve, pulling from the dark and grotesque anime of that era like Wicked City and Demon City Shinjuku, and from horror comic legends like Bernie Wrightson and Tim Vigil. The Vampire Verses smashes these influences together into a gritty, street-level horror story that's as brutal as it is compelling. The premise is a pure urban nightmare. We meet Angelica, an exotic dancer in New York City's seedy club scene. Her life gets violently flipped upside down when she's unwillingly turned into a creature of the night. As she deals with the horror of her transformation and the new thirst she feels, she finds out she's been dropped into the middle of a secret bloody war raging in the city's subways and back alleys. It's a war between ancient vampire factions, and Angelica quickly learns her transformation was no accident. She's a key player in an ancient prophecy called the Vampire Verses, and her fate is tied to this brutal conflict. So, what makes it scarier than Dracula? It's the sheer grit and the unsettling realism of it all. Dracula's horror is gothic and far away. It's stuck in a remote castle in a foggy London. The Vampire Verses brings the terror right to your doorstep. It's the horror of the familiar becoming monstrous. The subway you take to work, the alley you pass every day here, they're battlegrounds for inhuman creatures. These vampires aren't tragic romantic figures. They are brutal, desperate creatures fighting for survival in the filth of a modern city. The horror is immediate and personal. It's the fear that the monster isn't in some castle on a hill, but in the apartment right next to yours. Frank Forte's art is a huge part of this. His black and white style is raw and energetic, with heavy inks and a kinetic feeling that makes every punch and bite feel real. It isn't clean or polished. It's messy and chaotic, a perfect match for the down and dirty nature of this vampire war. It gives you that classic indie horror feeling, where the passion and raw creativity just bleed onto every page. This isn't a story about seduction. It's about survival, and the art never lets you forget how bloody that fight is. For its raw, street-level brutality, the Vampire Verses earns its spot as a truly terrifying modern vampire tale. Section 2, Number 6, Vampironica, at number 6. We've got a comic that takes such a wild idea and executes it with such horrific style that you just can't ignore it. From the Archie Horror imprint, the same folks who gave us Afterlife with Archie and Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, comes Vampironica. The creative team of Greg and Meg Smallwood takes the wholesome, all-American world of Riverdale and infects it with a vicious strain of vampirism. The premise is as brilliant as it is bizarre. Veronica Lodge, Riverdale's resident witch girl, gets turned into a vampire by an ancient bloodsucker. Suddenly, the socialite who worried about what to wear to the dance now has to worry about an unquenchable thirst for the blood of her friends. The story starts with a bang, with a fully transformed Veronica crashing a party to save Cheryl Blossom from a pack of feudal vampires. We then flash back to see how her nightmare started. It's your classic teen drama, violently derailed by the supernatural. A date with Reggie is cut short when an ancient vampire attacks her in her own home, turning her life into a fight for her soul. What you get is a fantastic mix of high school drama and brutal blade-style action, as Veronica battles her own predatory instincts while protecting her town from the monsters who made her. So why is this scarier than Dracula? It cleverly subverts our expectations and turns nostalgia into a weapon. We all know Riverdale. We know Archie, Betty, and Veronica. They are icons of innocent Americana. Vampironica takes that safe, familiar world and just desecrates it. The horror comes from seeing this perfect town become a hunting ground. The terror is in the question. What happens when the girl next door becomes a predator? When the love triangle isn't about who to take to prom, but who to feed on first? Dracula's horror is about the fear of the foreign, the ancient evil invading the modern world. Vampironica's horror is more insidious. It's the evil that comes from within, twisting the familiar into something unrecognizable. Greg Smallwood's art is absolutely phenomenal at capturing this. It's clean and detailed, nailing the classic Archie feel in one panel, then diving into gothic horror in the next. The heavy shading and perfectly balanced colors create a sense of dread hanging over the cheerful town of Riverdale. And when the violence hits, it's shocking and visceral, a stark contrast to the setting. It's this brilliant balancing act that makes Vampironica so effective and unsettling. Section 3. Number 5. Bleed Them Dry for number 5. We're blasting into a neon-soaked, dystopian future for a comic that is one of the most inventive genre mashups I've ever seen. Get ready for Bleed Them Dry, a ninja vampire tale from Vault Comics. Just let that sink in for a second. Cyberpunk, ninjas, vampires. It sounds like a fever dream of everything cool. And I promise, the execution is even better. Created by Hiroshi Koizumi and brought to life by writer Elliot Ray Hall and artist Dyke Ruin, this comic is a hyper-violent, stylized action epic. The story is set in the year 3333 in the Japanese-engineered megacity of Asylum. In this future, vampires, called immortals, are real and live alongside humans, though things are a little tense. A fragile peace exists, but it's shattered when someone starts brutally murdering vampires. Detective Harper Holloway is on the case, and what starts as a murder investigation spirals into a massive conspiracy. Holloway is a classic badass detective, and her partner happens to be a suave, white-haired vampire, which just adds to the intrigue. This is scarier than Dracula because it completely reinvents the vampire's place in the world and combines it with relentless, kinetic violence. Dracula is a creature of the shadows. In Bleed Them Dry, vampires are out in the open. You can literally order a cup of warm blood at a coffee shop. The fear isn't about being discovered. It's the terror of a society where superhuman predators are an accepted part of life, and the systems keeping them in check are starting to fail. The horror here is layered. It's the noir paranoia of a detective story where you can't trust anyone. It's the body horror of brutal martial arts, where swords slice through bodies. And it's the existential dread of its cyberpunk setting. A world where humanity is just a pawn in a much older, deadlier game. The fear isn't just that a vampire will bite you. It's that your entire reality is a lie built by these immortal beings. Dyke Ruin's artwork is a standout, perfectly nailing the neon noir vibe. The city of Asylum is breathtaking and vibrant, but also dark and foreboding. The action is frenetic and beautifully choreographed, feeling like a supernatural version of the Raid. Ruin's style has been compared to the work on American Vampire, with a hint of manga influence that gives the characters an incredible energy. Bleed Them Dry is a thrilling and surprisingly deep comic that blends genres into something totally new and terrifying. Section 4. Number 4 Vampire. The Masquerade sliding into our number 4 spot is a comic that brings one of the richest, most complex vampire mythologies ever to the page. Vault Comics Vampire, The Masquerade. If you've ever rolled dice in the world of darkness, you know this is about so much more than drinking blood. It's a game of political intrigue, personal horror, and the losing battle against the monster inside. This comic series, headed up by writers like Tim Seeley, Tinny Howard, and Blake Howard, brilliantly captures that feeling. The series is set in Minneapolis and St. Paul and follows two parallel stories. The first, Winter's Teeth, follows Cecily Bain, a tough-as-nails enforcer for the Camarilla, the vampire ruling class. Her job is to maintain the masquerade, the absolute rule that keeps vampires secret from humanity. Cecily's unlife gets messy when she takes a newly sired fledgling, Alejandra, under her wing, pulling her into a conspiracy that could bring down the whole city. The second story, The Anarch Tailies, focuses on a found family of vampire outcasts investigating a murder the powerful don't care about. So what makes this scarier than Dracula? The psychological and political horror. Dracula is a single big threat. He's the monster. In Vampire, The Masquerade, the monsters are everywhere, and they've built a feudal society that mirrors the worst parts of our own. The horror isn't just about being hunted. It's about being a pawn in a game played by immortals who see humans and even younger vampires as completely disposable. The terror here is the crushing weight of history and the hopelessness of being powerless in a system built on backstabbing and shifting allegiances. This isn't good versus evil. It's a morally gray world where every character is compromised, fighting their inner beast while trying to survive their so-called allies. The story really explores the personal horror of vampirism losing your humanity and struggling with an eternal curse. The art, from talents like Divnalia Pramanik and Nathan Gooden, perfectly captures this dark, gothic punk world. It's rough, edgy, and full of shadows, reflecting the gritty nature of the stories. The visuals emphasize the emotional toll of this on life, from quiet moments of despair to the explosive violence that's always just around the corner. Vampire, The Masquerade is terrifying because it shows us that the scariest monsters aren't just the ones with fangs, but the ones who build systems of power that grind everyone else to dust. Section 5. Number 3. Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, for our number 3 pick. We're stepping into a world known for witchcraft, but trust me, its take on vampires and horror is so dark it absolutely deserves a spot on this list. I'm talking about Chilling Adventures of Sabrina from Archie Horror. While Sabrina is a witch, this comic, written by Roberto Aguirre Sacasa, doesn't shy away from exploring all kinds of occult horror, and its vampire elements are genuinely chilling. This is not the quirky Sabrina from 90s TV. This is a mature, deeply disturbing horror series that reimagines the character with a thick coat of occult dread, satanic politics, and shocking gore. The series is a masterclass in atmospheric horror. It creates a world steeped in ancient, dark traditions where every shadow feels like a threat. While the main plot is about Sabrina's struggle between her mortal life and her destiny in the Church of Night, the vampire characters and lore are just as terrifying as any demon. These vampires aren't romantic figures. They're deeply tied to the darkest corners of the occult, ancient predators whose goals are just as sinister as any devil's. Why does a witch comic land so high on a vampire list? Because of its brilliant portrayal of inescapable evil. Dracula's horror is an external threat that is eventually defeated. In Sabrina's world, evil is the system. It's in her community, her family, her very identity. The horror is psychological. It has the dread of being born into a world where monstrous choices are the only ones you have. The vampires here feel like a natural part of that occult horror. They aren't just out for blood. They're players in the brutal politics of hell, making them unpredictable and far more dangerous than a simple predator. Robert Hack's art is the soul of this comic's terror. It has a retro painted style that looks like a lost artifact from the 60s. The muted, washed-out colors give every page a dreamlike or rather nightmarish quality. The character designs are just unsettling. The art doesn't rely on jump scares. It builds a suffocating sense of dread, which makes the moments of graphic violence all the more shocking when they happen. Chilling Adventures of Sabrina is a modern horror masterpiece, and its handling of all things supernatural, including vampires, is so smart and genuinely scary it leaves the classic Gothic tailies in the dust. Section 6. Number 2, Hellsing Crashing In at Number 2, is a manga that is a glorious, gory symphony of violence and supernatural horror. The legendary Hellsing by Kota Hirano. If you're looking for subtle, atmospheric dread, maybe look somewhere else. Hellsing is a full-throttle, action horror epic that's all about unleashing carnage in the most brutal and stylish way imaginable. The story follows the Hellsing organization, a secret branch of the British government that protects the country from supernatural threats. Led by the iron-willed Sir Integra Hellsing, their ultimate weapon is a vampire of unimaginable power, a demon who swore loyalty to the Hellsing family after being defeated by Abraham Van Helsing himself. His name is Alucard. And yes, that's Dracula spelled backward. But this isn't the Dracula, you know. This is Dracula turned into a weapon to hunt his own kind. Joined by the newly turned vampire and former cop, Sarah's Victoria Alucard wages war against ghouls, Vatican assassins, and most terrifyingly, the remnants of a Nazi group called Millennium, who want to create an army of artificial vampires and plunge the world into endless war. What makes Hellsing so much scarier than the original Dracula? The sheer, unapologetic nihilism and the scale of its brutality. Stoker's novel is a story of good versus evil. Hellsing is a story of monsters fighting monsters, and humanity is just caught in the bloody crossfire. The terror here isn't a creature in the shadows. It's the absolute gleeful embrace of destruction. The villains, especially the Nazi vampires of Millennium, aren't just evil. They're fanatics who live for violence. They don't want to conquer the world. They just want to watch it burn. Alucard himself is a terrifying force of nature. He's arrogant, cruel, and he absolutely loves the slaughter, often toying with his opponents before annihilating them. His power is apocalyptic. At his peak, he can dissolve into a sea of blood and shadow, unleashing the souls of everyone he's consumed in a tidal wave of death. The horror of Hellsing is the horror of total, unrestrained warfare, where the lines between hero and monster are drowned in blood. The series is packed with disturbing imagery and psychological torture that pushes characters to their breaking points. Kota Hirano's art is stylish, gritty, and incredibly dynamic. He has a masterful command of shadow, creating a sharp, intense look that defines the series. The action is fast and bloody, and Hirano isn't afraid to dedicate entire pages to depicting glorious, chaotic carnage. And yet, there's a tragic core to it all, especially in Alucard, a being cursed with an immortality he hates, searching for a worthy human to finally end his monstrous existence. Section 7. Number 1. American Vampire, and that brings us to the number 1 spot. The comic that, more than any other on this list, completely redefined the vampire for a new century and stands as a true achievement in modern horror. I'm talking about the masterpiece from writer Scott Snyder and artist Rafael Albuquerque, Vertigo, American Vampire. The core idea is pure genius. The series imagines that vampires aren't one single species, but have different bloodlines that evolve based on where they take root. And in the 19th century American West, something new was born. We're introduced to Skinner Sweet, a vicious, candy-loving outlaw who rises from his grave as a new breed, the first American vampire. He's stronger, faster, and more ferocious than the old European lines. And most importantly, he can walk in the sun. The series then brilliantly tracks this new bloodline through the decades of American history. We follow Skinner as he carves a bloody path through the 20th century, and we meet his first and only progeny, Pearl Jones. She is a struggling actress in 1920s Hollywood who is attacked by a coven of old-world vampires hiding among the elite. Left for dead, she's saved by Skinner, who turns her into an American vampire like him, setting her on a path of bloody revenge. So why is American Vampire scarier than Dracula? It creates a new mythology that's both a brilliant evolution of the classic and a terrifying reflection of its own culture. Snyder and Stephen King, who co-wrote the first arc, literally set out to make vampires scary again, and they absolutely succeeded. The American vampires are monsters born of the frontier, savage, unpredictable, and brutally efficient. They aren't defined by Gothic tragedy. They're defined by manifest destiny and a lust for power and violence. Their monstrous forms are terrifying, with snake-like jaws and long claws, a world away from the suave count. The horror in American Vampire is the horror of evolution. It's the terror of the old guard realizing a new, stronger predator has arrived. The series is a sprawling generational epic that uses its immortal characters to explore the dark underbelly of American history, from the Wild West to the Jazz Age and beyond. The vampires are a metaphor for the nation itself, violent, innovative, and always at war with its own past. And the art, my God, the art by Rafael Albuquerque is just breathtaking. His style is dynamic and expressive, shifting to match the tone of each new era. His action sequences are explosive, and his depiction of the vampires in their monstrous forms is pure nightmare fuel. American Vampire is a true epic. It is a comic that respects the classics enough to burn them down and build something new and terrifying from the ashes. For my money, it's the single greatest and scariest vampire comic of the modern age. So that's our list. 7 vampire comics that prove the genre is not only alive and well, but more terrifying and innovative than ever. From the gritty streets of New York to the neon-drenched future, these creators have pushed what a vampire story can be. Now, I want to hear from you. What are your favorite modern vampire comics? Are there any hidden gems or brutal masterpieces that I missed? Let me know everything in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'm always looking for new recommendations from this community. And of course, if you enjoyed this trip to the dark side of comics, do me a huge favor and hit that like button. Share this video with a horror fan. You know who thinks Dracula is the final word on vampires. Every like, share, and new subscription helps the channel grow and lets me keep making videos just like this one. Conclusion: while Dracula will always be the immortal patriarch of the genre, the vampire has evolved. It's mutated. It has become faster, more brutal, and way more complex. These 7 comics are proof of the enduring power of this iconic monster and the boundless creativity of comics. They show us that there are still new, terrifying corners of the night to explore, far beyond the shadow of Dracula's castle. Thanks so much for watching. Keep your eyes peeled, because next time we might be tackling the sanity-shattering world of cosmic horror, or maybe digging up the best werewolf comics ever made. You'll have to subscribe to find out what darkness we uncover next. Until then, keep reading comics and stay spooky.